The snow hadn't melted in King's Landing since Jon Snow took the Iron Throne. It wasn't the endless winter the maesters warned of, but it lingered, colder than before, sharper in the air. The people called it stark weather, as if the North had crept into the heart of the South, dragged in by a man who never asked to rule, and a woman who never stopped planning. The bells had rung for peace when Daenerys Targaryen fell, her blood steaming against the cold stone. Jon didn't speak when it happened. He only watched the blade disappear into her heart, like it had always been meant to find her there. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he didn't even look away. And when the lords and ladies of Westeros gathered in the ash-covered courtyard days later, it wasn't Tyrion who named him king, it was Sansa Stark. "He's the blood of the dragon and the heart of the wolf," she'd said. "Who else do you think should rule?" But when Jon stood with the crown resting in his hands, he didn't put it on his head. He turned to her, the crowd watching, confused and murmuring. "We'll rule together," he'd said. "The 7 kingdoms need more than just one sword. They need a mind." That's when it began. That's when people started whispering. Sansa didn't sit beside Jon out of love, at least not the kind that makes songs. She sat beside him because she had bled and clawed her way through men who thought her a pawn. She wore her northern red and gray like armor, her hair braided like her mother's. She didn't smile much anymore. Jon was quieter now, more distant than he had ever been, as if stabbing Daenerys had killed something inside him too. He didn't hunt, he didn't laugh, he didn't even ride Ghost anymore. He only ruled. The realm did not welcome the North's cold rule. Highgarden resented losing their power. Dorne resisted any Stark influence. The Vale remained neutral, but uneasy. And yet, the realm stayed under control. Not because they loved Jon Snow, but because they feared what Sansa might do if they crossed him. Because no one forgot how the Dragon Queen died. 3 months into their reign, a noblewoman from Old Town was found murdered outside the Red Keep. Poison. Her tongue swollen, her eyes black. Rumor said she'd been overheard mocking the queen, calling her Jon's red-haired leash. The court was told it was a robbery, but no one believed it. Tyrion knew better. He kept the truth in his wine. "You're making enemies in silence, Sansa," he told her once. "Even Cersei let people see her wrath coming." "I'm not Cersei," she replied coldly. "I'm worse. I don't drink before I strike." Jon heard them. He didn't say a word. The small council had changed. Davos remained, older, wearier, loyal to Jon, but wary of Sansa's growing influence. Brienne of Tarth served as Queen's Guard, silent, watching, never leaving Sansa's side. Arya had vanished west, far from the court. Bran never answered Raven letters, and Samwell Tarly, now Grand Maester, tried his best to soften the cold cruelty creeping into court decisions. But it was clear. Jon wore the crown. Sansa wielded the knife. One night, as snow fell even in the streets of Flea Bottom, Jon walked the empty halls of the Red Keep. His hand trailed along the cold stone walls, the air as still as a crypt. He found her in the council chamber, alone, reading by candlelight. The fire barely touched her face. "You're not sleeping," he said softly. "Neither are you." He leaned against the wall. "Did you ever think it would feel like this?" She looked up. "Like what?" "Like ruling is just quiet punishment." Her eyes didn't soften. "It's only punishment if you're looking for peace. I stopped expecting peace after Ramsay." He flinched. She never brought up the past without reason. "We can still make this kingdom better," he said, almost pleading. "Together." She closed the book and stood. "Then stop trying to make everyone love you. They never will. But they will obey you, if they fear me." For a moment he thought of the Old North, of Ned, of warm fires and silent honor. But that world was gone. All that remained was a throne, shared, cracked, cold, and the sister, who refused to sit behind him. The silence of the Red Keep was a kind that seeped into the bones. Jon would often wake in the early hours, the sun not yet risen, and find himself walking the same stone corridors in search of something that no longer existed. Perhaps it never had. Peace, redemption, a clearer purpose. But Sansa, she never wandered. She didn't drift through her reign. She planned every word, every alliance, every punishment. The crown didn't rest heavy on her head. It made her spine straighter. In the weeks that followed their late-night conversation, the Seven Kingdoms began to fracture, not with open rebellion, but with letters. Raven after raven, demands cloaked in diplomacy, insults hidden beneath praise. Even Lord Gendry of Storm's End wrote with barely veiled frustration at new taxes Sansa had imposed to rebuild the Red Keep and the city's war-torn streets. "These lords are used to dancing with dragons," she told Jon as she read through the pile. "They've forgotten the cold bite of a northern winter." Jon leaned against the table, his face grim. "Gendry's not an enemy." "No," she replied, "not yet." Tyrion, ever the careful observer, had begun to keep records. Not official ones, those he left to the scribes, but in his own private notes, he tracked how many nobles disappeared or died mysteriously under the new reign. He tracked the shift in policy. The way Jon hesitated more at council meetings, how he deferred to Sansa's judgments, even when they strayed from his better instincts. "She's the true ruler," he muttered to Davos one night, drunk in the royal gardens. "Jon may wear the crown, but Sansa wears his soul like a ring on her finger." Davos didn't disagree. He only sipped his ale in silence, then said, "Maybe he gave it to her willingly." The first true crack in their reign came from the Reach. House Redwine, always ambitious, had begun rallying minor lords in the south, claiming the Stark rule was illegitimate. That the murder of Daenerys was treason. That Jon Snow, born of a Targaryen prince and raised as a bastard, was no true king. It was quiet at first, then louder. They declared independence in the name of restoring balance to the realm. Jon wanted to send envoys. He wanted to speak, to reason. But Sansa, "We send a raven, and it carries fire," she said coldly. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means we make an example. You know what Daenerys would have done." "So, do they?" Jon clenched his jaw. "I killed her for that." "No," she said softly. "You killed her for losing control. But you knew she was right." He didn't respond. He couldn't. 3 weeks later, the Redwine Lord's castle was burned to the ground. Not by dragons, by wildfire. What little remained from the Mad King's hidden caches. The flames turned. Green against the night sky, visible even from the capital's tallest towers. Sansa didn't blink. She didn't even speak of it at the next council meeting. Jon didn't ask how she obtained it. He didn't ask who carried out the plan. But that night, he sat alone in the old throne room, once shattered and now repaired. The Iron Throne stood tall again, its blades newly forged, sharper, more cruel. And he sat upon it, not as a ruler, but as a man who no longer recognized his reflection in the steel. The people of King's Landing began to fear the quiet. Under Cersei, terror had been loud. Explosions, executions, proclamations. But under the Wolf King and his queen, fear settled like mist. You didn't know when it would come, only that it might. Bread was cheaper, the streets were cleaner, justice was faster. But so was punishment. And in the brothels and taverns, whispers grew louder. They rule like ice, cold, unforgiving. They say the queen still speaks to Arya through shadows. I heard the king hasn't touched a woman since the Dragon Queen. They say he only touches her, his sister. No one said those things in daylight. Jon visited the crypts of the Red Keep one morning, just before dawn. His steps echoed in the stillness, torches flickering on the walls. He stopped before a new tomb, no markings, no name, just a slab of smooth stone. Daenerys. He stood there for a long time. Sansa found him there later. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him. She was right, he said eventually, his voice hollow. The world doesn't want to be saved, it wants to be ruled. Sansa didn't disagree. You chose this path. I'm only helping you walk it. He turned to her then, really looked at her. Do you ever wonder what it cost us? He asked. She met his eyes, sharp and blue as a winter sky. Everything. Then she took his hand in, hers. It was not warmth she offered, it was strength, and neither one let go. The days grew darker, though the sun still rose. In King's Landing, fear had become so normal that the people adapted. They learned not to ask questions when guards dragged nobles out in the middle of the night. They bowed lower, spoke less, and kept their heads down. The Queen's spies, called snow crows in whispered circles, watched from corners, their white cloaks blending with the mist, their knives rarely seen before they were felt. The Seven Kingdoms had peace, but it was the kind that smothered. In the north, it was different. Winterfell remained mostly untouched by court politics, guarded fiercely by a new warden of the north, Sir Podrick Payne, a loyal sword raised under Brienne's guidance. The people still followed the old ways, still prayed to the weirwoods, still told stories of Jon Snow, some with pride, others with growing bitterness. For while he was their blood, he no longer ruled them alone. Sansa's hand was felt in every raven, every tax, every command sent from the Iron Throne. A raven arrived one foggy morning from the Vale, Lord Robin Arryn, awkward, still childlike, but now heavily influenced by a circle of old and power-hungry advisors, was threatening to close the mountain passes to the crown's men. He claimed the Queen was acting beyond her place, that the realm needed balance again, that perhaps Jon should rule alone. Tyrion chuckled grimly when he read the letter aloud. Funny. The boy who once suckled at his mother's breast until he could talk now dares question your authority. Sansa's eyes narrowed. He questions mine, not Jon's. They think he's soft. They think I'm the problem. And are you? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Jon called a council, meeting the next evening. The chamber was tense. Brienne stood silent. Davos watched the Queen closely. Samwell Tarly hesitated before speaking, his voice uneasy. Jon, Your Grace, maybe we should slow down. Let Sansa return to Winterfell for a time. Ease the tension. Make it seem like you're ruling with independence, publicly, I mean. You want me to send her away? Jon asked, blinking slowly. Not send, Sam said carefully. Strategically, distance. Sansa didn't flinch. They don't fear him. They fear me. And now you all suggest the answer is to make me disappear for the sake of appearances. No, one saying disappear, Davos murmured. But the realm needs a softer hand right now. You've ruled well, too well. That's what scares them. Sansa looked at Jon. He stared into the fire for a long moment, before finally speaking. Do you want to go? She shook her head once. Do you want me to? His voice dropped. I don't know. The silence hung heavy after that. That night, Jon stood alone on the balcony outside their chambers, overlooking the city. The torches below looked like flickering ghosts in the dark. The wind howled like something wounded. Sansa joined him after, a while wrapped in a gray cloak lined with black fur. They're turning on me, she said quietly. No, Jon replied. They're turning on us. She turned toward him, searching his face. Then do something. Show them you still choose me. He hesitated. What would that mean? Sansa stepped closer, close enough for their breaths to mix in the cold air. A wedding! His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes cracked. We're family, he said hoarsely. We're all that's left, she replied. We've spilled enough blood to rule this kingdom. The people need a symbol. Give them one. He didn't answer. But he didn't pull away either. By the end of the week, ravens flew in every direction. The king and queen would marry at the turn of the moon. The streets of King's Landing were hung with banners, stark gray beside Targaryen black, a twisted statement of legacy and dominance. The lords came, as expected, bringing gifts and blessings with clenched jaws and forced smiles. Sansa walked through the throne room with her head high, her dress stitched with the direwolf sigil in silver thread. She made no apologies. Jon stood beside her, a king in name, a shadow in spirit. But it was clear to all. This was not a marriage of love. This was a marriage of conquest. On the night of the wedding, the rain poured. Not storming, just cold and relentless. They didn't speak during the ceremony, only exchanged vows with icy eyes and trembling hands. The High Septon's voice echoed, hollow in the sept, unable to wash away the discomfort that settled like dust on every guest. At the feast, music played, wine flowed, and no one dared speak of the union's taboo. But outside the castle, the whispers turned into roars. Brother and sister, married now. She's worse than the Dragon Queen. He's not the man he once was. Starks are no better than Lannisters. Late that night, when the music had faded and the guests stumbled back to their chambers, Jon sat in the darkness of the royal bedchamber, his sword Longclaw resting beside him. Sansa entered quietly, closing the door behind her. Neither spoke. After a long moment, she sat beside him. "You still think this is wrong?" she said. "I think everything about this world is wrong," he replied. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then maybe it deserves rulers like us." And for the first time in weeks, he didn't argue. The storm broke before dawn. By the time the first arrow struck the guard tower near King's Gate, the castle was already under siege. Not from a foreign army, not from distant enemies, but from within. High Garden forces, disguised as merchants, had entered the city days before. Disgruntled bannermen from the Reach and the Vale, united under the forgotten banners of old allegiances, rose in the night. They struck in silence, knowing the guards would be half drunk from the royal wedding. Inside, the Red Keep, steel clashed against steel. Jon was the first to hear the alarm bells. He was already dressed. He hadn't slept since the ceremony. Something in his gut told him the quiet was unnatural, that the silence Sansa had created wasn't peace, only a pause before something darker. He grabbed Longclaw and was halfway through the corridor when Brienne burst through the door, sword drawn. "Rebels," she said, breath short. "Inside the city. Some are already in the keep." Sansa appeared behind them, calm as ever, already in armor. "Let them come," she said coldly. "This is the last mistake they'll make." Down in the courtyard, chaos reigned. Sir Davos rallied what guards he could. Tyrion stood atop a wall, shouting orders with a dagger in his hand he barely knew how to use. Samwell, armed only with a scroll and shaking hands, directed maesters to the wounded. Fire spread in pockets across the lower city. It was no full-scale invasion, more of a surgical strike designed to take out the crown swiftly, kill the king, silence the queen, and declare a new ruler. But they had not accounted for the wolf in their midst. Jon met the first group of rebels in the western hall of the keep. 4 men with blades and blood on their hands, laughing as they pushed through servants. He didn't speak. He didn't threaten. He simply cut them down. Longclaw sang with each swing. The first blade caught a man across the face. The second severed a throat. The third ran straight through mail and bone. Jon fought not with anger, but with purpose. He did not shout. He did not roar. He moved like death-given form. Sansa, meanwhile, stood atop the great balcony above the throne room, watching as flames licked the edges of the city. Brienne was at her side, covered in blood. Behind them, the royal. "Guards sealed the doors." "They came to kill us," Brienne said. "They came to test us," Sansa corrected. "Let them see what a Stark does to traitors." She raised her hand. Moments later, dozens of prisoners, caught in the corridors by the Queen's spies, were dragged into the throne room. They were lords, knights, and pages alike, all tied. All bloody, Sansa walked slowly down the stairs of the dais, her footsteps echoing across the marble floor. One of the men spat. "You're no queen. You're a curse on this realm." Sansa only smiled. "Curses are real, Lord Merton. I've lived through mine. You won't live through yours." She gave the order. Brienne flinched. Even she wasn't ready for what came next. The heads fell one by one. Clean, swift. No speeches, no trials, just silence. When Jon entered the throne room an hour later, it was stained with blood. Sansa stood at the base of the Iron Throne, red speckled across her cheeks like paint. "It's done," she said simply. He looked at her. Really looked at her. She didn't flinch. Didn't weep. She wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She was something else now, and maybe so was he. In the days that followed, the surviving rebels were executed. Their banners burned, their castles claimed by the crown. Sansa named new lords, ones loyal only to her and Jon. The council protested, but not loudly. They'd seen enough heads roll, but something had shifted. The people whispered more boldly now. The marriage, the executions, the purge. A new title surfaced in the streets, spoken quietly by beggars and merchants. The Blood Queen, and others, more ominous still, called Jon not king, but ghost. One night, Jon stood before the Iron Throne again, alone, watching the firelight dance on the blades. His thoughts churned. Of Daenerys, of the Night's Watch, of ghosts in the north and ashes in the south. He didn't hear Sansa approach. "You never sit in it," she said softly. He didn't turn. "It's not meant to be comfortable. It's not meant to be fair either." She came to stand beside him. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only of losing you." He looked at her now, the sister who was no longer just that, his partner, his shadow, his fire and ice. "I fear what we're becoming," he whispered. "We're becoming what the realm made us," she replied. Then gently, she took his hand. They stood there, two children of winter, bound by war, ruling a kingdom forged in fire and silence. The silence that followed the rebellion wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness before another storm, heavier and more dangerous. What the Reach and Veil failed to do by blade, others now schemed to achieve through whispers and legacy. Far, across the narrow sea, beyond the realm's gaze, another fire had begun to burn. A boy named Aelix Targaryen, barely 16 with white hair and violet eyes, had grown up under the protection of House Celtigar on the island of Claw Isle. Quietly, secretly, raised by loyalists who had fled after Daenerys' fall. He claimed to be her nephew, son of Rhaegar's second daughter, long thought stillborn. Most thought the boy a myth, but the lords of Essos had begun to listen, especially those who had once bent the knee to Daenerys. And as Sansa's reign in Westeros grew darker, as executions increased and ravens returned unanswered, some believed it was time for fire to answer ice once again. In King's Landing, Sansa had taken to ruling from the throne directly, her voice cold, commands swift. Jon often sat beside her in silence. He still fought with sword when needed, still trained with the guards, but spoke less and less in council. It was Sansa's word that passed as law. Brienne began to notice the change. She brought it to Tyrion first. "He doesn't look at anyone anymore," she said one afternoon in the God's Wood, the last sacred tree left standing behind the Red Keep. "He used to look people in the eye. He was present. Now it's like he's somewhere else." Tyrion sipped his wine. "Perhaps he finally sees what we all refuse to admit. This throne consumes everyone." "I'm more worried it's Sansa doing the consuming," Brienne said, her voice low. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "Careful. That kind of talk gets people beheaded these days." But even he didn't smile. Jon hadn't slept in 2 nights. His dreams were full of shadows. He saw Daenerys burning again. Not at his hand, but by Sansa's. He saw Arya screaming from across a sea. Bran with blank eyes in a tree of blood. And worst of all, he saw his own reflection in the iron blades, and there was no face, only a wolf's skull. A raven came from Dragonstone. Samwell brought it to Jon personally. "There's movement across the sea," he said carefully. "Ships gathering, flags we haven't seen in years, Targaryen loyalists." Jon read the parchment slowly, his face unreadable. Sansa walked in a moment later. "What news?" she asked. Jon handed it to her without a word. She scanned it quickly. Her lips tightened. "Another pretender," she said. "We've dealt with worse." Sam hesitated. "This one has support, gold, ships, and dragons." The room went still. Sansa's eyes snapped up. "That's impossible." "Maybe not," Sam said quietly. "There are rumors, in Valyria, of eggs hatching, of fire returning." Sansa turned to Jon. "If we wait, this will grow. We need to strike first." Jon didn't respond. He stared out the window where the red sun was rising behind a veil of smoke from the city's chimneys. Sam spoke again. "There's more." They both looked at him. "A letter, signed with a dragon seal. It's addressed to you." Jon took it with shaking fingers. He opened it slowly. The writing was formal, careful. "To Jon Snow, King of the 7 Kingdoms, you sit on the throne stained with my family's blood. You wear the crown meant for the last true queen. But I do not seek revenge. Not yet. I offer you a chance. Come to Dragonstone. Speak with me. Learn who I am before the storm begins. You, more than anyone, know the weight of fire. Signed, Aelix of House Targaryen, rightful heir of the dragon." Jon read it twice. Then again. Sansa was already shaking her head. "No, this is a trap. It might not be," Jon said quietly. "He wants to draw you out, make you weak. Or he wants to end this without more death. You think he'll just bend the knee once he sees your honor? He's a dragon, Jon. They don't bend. They burn." He turned to her. "So do wolves." Their eyes locked, colder than steel. Sansa's voice softened, but it lost none of its edge. "If you go, I go with you." "No," he said. "I go alone." She stepped back. For the first time in weeks, fear flickered across her face. "You're leaving me. I'm trying to save what little good is left in me. You don't trust me." "I trust you," he said. "I don't trust what ruling has turned us into." He walked out before she could stop him. Tyrion found Sansa that night in the war room, standing over a map of Westeros, candles burning low. She didn't look up. "He's gone," she said. "I know." Tyrion poured himself a drink. "You think he'll return?" "I think if he does, he won't be the same man." Tyrion raised his cup. "Neither are you, my queen." She didn't argue. She only stared down at Dragonstone's mark on the map and whispered something no one was meant to hear. "Let the dragons come." The sea was calm when Jon Snow arrived at Dragonstone. His ship was small, no banners, no guards, just a stark sigil painted faintly on the sail, faded from salt and sun. He stood at the bow as they neared the ancient fortress, its jagged towers rising like black teeth from the cliffs. The skies were gray, always gray. It had been years since he'd last stepped foot here, back when Daenerys still believed in changing the world. Now he returned, not as a lover, not as a brother to the realm, but as a king walking into the fire to meet a ghost that called itself kin. He was expected. The courtyard was empty when he disembarked, save for a line of armored soldiers in crimson. Cloaks. Not gold, not black. Crimson. A new color. A new claim. Their faces were young, fresh. Most couldn't have seen more than 2 battles, but they stood tall as Jon walked between them. The boy was waiting at the top of the steps. Aelix. Targaryen. He couldn't have been more than 16, but he looked like a ghost of old Valyria. Silver hair tied neatly behind his head. Pale skin, eyes like sharp violet knives. He wore no crown. Just a simple black tunic stitched with red thread in the shape of a dragon's wings. He smiled as Jon approached. "So you are real," Aelix said softly. "So are you." "I was beginning to wonder if the crown had made you a coward." Jon stopped 2 steps below him. "Careful, boy. I came alone, but not unarmed." Aelix didn't flinch. "Then we understand each other." Inside, Dragonstone's great hall, the stone walls were colder than Jon remembered. There were no torches, only open fire pits that cast wild shadows across the carved dragons. They walked together in silence until Aelix finally said, "You don't deny what I am?" Jon glanced sideways. "No. The blood's in your eyes. And, do you believe I'm a threat?" "I believe you think you're the answer." Aelix nodded, then stopped at the war table where Daenerys once stood. "She meant to save the world, didn't she? My aunt. They called her a tyrant, a mad woman, but she gave slaves freedom. She gave peasants hope. She gave traitors fire." Jon didn't respond. Aelix placed a hand on the table. "And then she trusted a man with her heart, and he put a knife in it." That made Jon flinch. "Why did you kill her?" Aelix asked, not in anger, but with genuine curiosity. Jon stared at the table. "Because she forgot who she was. Or maybe she became what she always was." Aelix tilted his head. "And you think I'll become her?" Jon looked at him now. Really looked. And in the boy's face he saw something terrifying. Control. Not the wild madness of Daenerys, not the cruelty of Viserys. This boy had been trained. "No," Jon said carefully. "You'll become worse." Later that night, they sat across from each other in the old solar, a bottle of wine between them. Aelix drank like a noble, carefully. Jon didn't touch his cup. "You could support me," the boy said. "Name me heir, rule the north, keep your queen, let fire and ice stand together the way it was always meant to." Jon stared at the flames. "I've known too many kings," he said. "They all start with good intentions, then they bleed the realm dry to keep their crowns." "And what about queens?" Aelix asked. Jon's silence said more than words. In the shadows behind the walls, 2 spies listened. One belonged to Sansa, the other to something older, a secret alliance born in the ashes of the rebellion. Raven feathers and quiet knives. Their messages would be sent by morning. The game was moving faster now. Back in King's Landing, Sansa received Jon's raven by candlelight. It was short, plain, but every word carved itself into her mind. "He is real. He has support. And he has dragons." She dropped the letter onto the table, her hand trembling slightly. Tyrion stood nearby. "What will you do?" Sansa straightened. Her eyes gleamed like ice under moonlight. "Call the bannermen, all of them." Tyrion blinked. "You're going to war?" "No," she said coldly. "I'm ending it before it begins." "But Jon, she..." cut him off. If he chooses the boy, he's chosen treason. Brienne, watching from the shadows, finally spoke. And if he doesn't? Sansa looked up and her voice cracked, not with weakness, but fury. Then he better come back with that boy's head. That same night, Jon walked the cliffs of Dragonstone alone. The sea roared below, the wind tore at his cloak, and above, him. The sound he hadn't heard in years. Wings. A shadow passed over the moon, massive, graceful, terrifying. The dragon was young, still growing, red scales, gold eyes, a soft roar not yet deep but filled with promise. It circled once, then landed on the stone tower behind him, talons cracking the rock. Aelix stood nearby, watching. "She's called Valera," the boy said. "She was born the night your queen died. I thought it fitting." Jon's breath caught. The dragon lowered its head. "Watched him." "She likes you," Aelix whispered. "Maybe she senses the Targaryen in you." Jon turned to him, voice hollow. "Don't mistake blood for loyalty." Aelix smiled again. "Oh, I don't." Then his smile faded. "I just wonder, when the time comes, who will yours be to?" The decision hung in Jon's chest like a burning coal. He had come to Dragonstone seeking clarity, maybe peace. What he found was a boy with a dragon and a claim, and a world already choosing sides behind them both. Everywhere he turned, legacies stared him in the face. The war table, the throne Daenerys once eyed with madness, the cliffs where he'd once promised peace, and now this child, Aelix. He was no wild pretender. He was calm, calculated, confident, too confident for someone so young, which meant he wasn't alone. Someone, or something, had raised him to be a king. "I don't want your throne," Jon told him again the next day as they stood overlooking the narrow sea. "But you don't want to lose it either," Aelix replied. "And you will eventually, either to me or to her." Jon's jaw tightened. "Sansa rules beside me." Aelix turned toward him slowly. "No. She rules through you. You know it. The realm knows it. You think the lords bow because they love the king in the north? No. They bow because they fear what happens if they don't." Jon didn't answer. The boy pressed on. "She's becoming what Daenerys was accused of being, only colder. No fire, just ice. And ice doesn't rule. It freezes, it kills." A ship arrived that night under cover of darkness. Not Sansa's, not a Targaryen loyalist, but from the Free Cities. A sail ship with no banners, only gold in their eyes. Among the cargo, weapons, food, and scrolls. Propaganda, already written, already printed, leaflets with Aelix's name crowned in flame. The true heir has returned. Not a bastard, not a wolf, a dragon. No more siblings, no more blood queens. They would flood the ports by week's end. Back in King's Landing, the city was boiling. Sansa tried to keep control, tightening patrols, silencing rumors, hanging those caught spreading rebel words. But fear was growing. She stood before the council, colder than ever. "They think Jon will turn," she said, "that he'll side with the boy." Tyrion spoke gently. "You fear he won't come back?" She didn't answer. Sam tried next. "We should wait. Let Jon speak first. He'll do what's right." Brienne's voice was quieter. "What if he believes the boy is what's right?" That made Sansa turn, her eyes sharp and wet at the same time. "Then he's already dead. A raven flew." Jon's letter returned to the Red Keep within a day. Its words were fewer than before and far colder. "He means to take the throne by fire or force, but he offers me a place at his side if I support his claim." I said no. "I am returning. Have the crown ready." Sansa read it twice. She handed it to Tyrion with a flat expression. "Do you believe him?" he asked. "I believe he's coming back," she said. Then she added under her breath, "But I don't know who he's coming back as." Jon left Dragonstone before dawn. Aelix did not stop him. He only watched from the cliffs. The dragon perched. Behind him like a shadow waiting to grow. "You still think she deserves to rule?" Aelix asked one last time, his voice echoing over the waves. Jon paused. "No," he said, "but I don't think you do either." Then he boarded the ship and left the boy and his fire behind. 2 nights later, Jon returned to King's Landing under a moonless sky. He found the gates guarded double, the city tense. Inside the Red Keep, Sansa waited in the throne room, dressed not in queenly robes, but in armor. Brienne stood at her side, Tyrion, Davos, and Sam behind her, silent. Jon entered, alone. The doors boomed shut behind him. He looked at her. She looked at him. Something had changed in his eyes. They were no longer tired. They were no longer loyal. They were resolved. Sansa stepped forward. "You saw him." Jon nodded. "He's not lying about who he is." "Then he's a threat. He's a child with a dragon. You don't kill a child because he's dangerous. You prepare." Her voice sharpened. "You think I haven't been preparing? That's what I fear." They stood a few feet apart. The council watched without breathing. Jon continued. "He offered me a seat beside him, said I could rule the North. I said no. I told him I had already chosen my place." Her eyes softened. For a split second, then he said quietly, "But I also told him this throne is cursed." A pause. "I can't wear a crown anymore." The air shattered. "What are you saying?" Sansa asked. "I'm stepping down," Jon said. "No more king, no more queen. We give the realm back to the lords, a council, a future, not a dynasty, built on blood." Sansa's face cracked, like ice under pressure. "No." Jon stepped forward. "You know it's right. You've seen what this has done to us." "I won't give it up," she whispered. "Not after what I've done, not after what I've sacrificed." He looked at her, voice heavy. "Then you'll become her." She shook her head, backing away. "You would take this from me?" "I already did," he said. "The moment I let you rule through me." Brienne reached for her sword. Tyrion stepped forward. Sam put his hand over his mouth. The room was ready to explode. "And Sansa?" Sansa's eyes filled with tears, not grief. Fury. "You're no Stark," she whispered. "You're just a ghost wearing our name." Jon turned to leave, but her voice cut the air behind him. "If you walk out of here, don't come back." He didn't look back. He just kept walking. The Red Keep was quiet the morning Jon left. Not the tense silence of fear, nor the heavy stillness before war, but the silence of abandonment, of something broken that no longer wanted to be whole. Jon rode alone through the city, his cloak. Plain, no crown upon his brow. No guards followed him, no bells rang. People stared. They whispered, some bowed, others turned away. To most, he was still their king. To some, a traitor. To all, a mystery. He didn't stop riding until he reached the edge of the King's Road. Then he vanished north into the mists and left the realm behind. Sansa stood before the Iron Throne that afternoon, alone. She dismissed the council, ignored Brienne's worried glances, pushed away Sam's attempt at comfort. Tyrion watched from the shadows and said nothing. She sat upon the throne at last. Not beside Jon, not as Queen Regent, alone. The blades behind her back felt sharper now. She thought it might have been pride in her chest, but it wasn't. It was grief and rage, but mostly something worse. Emptiness. Across the narrow sea, Aelix sat in a torchlit chamber surrounded by maps and messengers. The moment word reached him that Jon Snow had stepped down, his eyes narrowed. "He gave it up," the boy said, stunned. The maester beside him nodded. "The realm is uncertain now. The queen rules alone." Aelix leaned back. "Then she's weaker than ever." The maester asked, "Should we wait, my prince, or strike?" Aelix turned to the window. The sea below was calm. The dragon on the cliff roared faintly in the distance. He didn't answer. In the weeks that followed, Westeros teetered. With Jon gone, rebellion stirred again in whispers. Lords who once respected the wolf now saw only the Blood Queen. Too minor. Houses in the Stormlands declared for Aelix. The Dornish sent no word at all. The Riverlands were split. The North remained loyal to the name Stark, but no longer sent food or soldiers south. The council grew smaller, fearful, silent, and still. Sansa did not yield. In the north, Jon returned to Winterfell like a ghost. He rode through the gates without fanfare. The guards recognized him, but said nothing. He passed the hall where he was once named king in the north, but it was quiet now, dusty, cold. He stood in the godswood for hours, the snow falling slowly, untouched, and that's where Arya found him. She stepped from the shadows, older, sharper, still wild. Her eyes softened at the sight of him. "You look more like Ned now," she said. He didn't smile. "I feel more like the executioner." They sat together under the heart tree. "She's not the same," Arya said after a while. "I know. She doesn't want peace anymore." "She never did," Jon said quietly. "She wanted justice. She just stopped caring who paid the price." Arya looked up. "Are you done fighting?" Jon didn't answer. She leaned closer. "Because if you're not, I'll stand with you." Aelix crossed the sea 2 months later. He landed at Storm's End with 300 men, 2 dragons, Valyra and a second, younger beast, still barely trainable, and an army of exiled knights from across the world. He called for banners. He offered pardons. He offered hope. And the realm, fractured, tired, and full of ghosts, listened. In King's Landing, Sansa prepared for war. She stood over the same war table where her father once dreamed of peace. Her hands didn't shake as she pushed tokens representing fleets, castles, and fire. "He has 2 dragons," Brienne said grimly. "We don't have any." "Then we take the skies from him," Sansa replied. "We kill the boy before they fly," Tyrion murmured from the corner. "Even if we win, the realm won't forgive another burning." Sansa looked at him. "Let them hate me. They already do." The battle came swift and brutal. It wasn't fought in the streets of King's Landing. It was fought on the fields near Harrenhal. Fittingly, where fire once melted stone, Aelix's dragons circled above. But Sansa had planned for that. Ballistas lined the hills. Northern archers waited in silence. She paid free cities for poisons laced in arrows. Her soldiers moved like ghosts. Brienne led the charge, but it was Arya who ended it. She moved through the chaos like wind, unseen until it was too late, and in the middle of the storm she found the boy king. Aelix Targaryen, the last dragon of his line, died with a whisper and a dagger in the throat. The war ended before the sun fell. Both dragons were wounded. One fled across the sea. The other, Valyra, screamed and burned through 3 war camps before disappearing into the clouds, never to return. Sansa did not celebrate. She returned to the throne room in silence. The realm was hers again. Weeks passed. Raven came to Winterfell. Jon read the letter under the pale moonlight. It said only, "It's done." No crown, no seal, no request. He read it once, then burned it in the godswood fire. A year later, a new council was formed. No kings, no queens, lords. elected a council of equals. Each region ruled itself. The Iron Throne sat empty, rusting in the wind. Sansa Stark vanished from public life. Some say she died in her chambers, others say she returned north in secret. But many believe she walks the halls of the Red Keep still, a ghost in gray. Never crowned again, and Jon Snow, he never ruled again. But when the people speak of the age of fire and ice, they speak his name first, the king who walked away and the queen who wouldn't.